Adrian, have you seen The Exorcist?
I have.
The original one from the 70s?
Yeah.
So, apparently, there's a gentleman in it who, I guess, there's one part where they do an x-ray of Reagan to try and figure out what's going on with her. One of those x-ray techs was played by a gentleman named Paul Bateson. And he is a convicted serial killer who dismembered and killed a series of gay men in the 70s.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Sorry to start this one off on a bit of a bombshell down note, but welcome back to the Drive Back podcast. My name is Garret.
And I'm Adrian.
And today we've got another show and tell, one of our favorite episode types to do, which is what, Adrian?
It's where I have seen a movie and I make Garret watch it, and then Garret has seen a movie and he makes me watch it. So each one of us watches a movie for the first time while the other one rewatches it. And then we kind of talk about it.
That is exactly correct. And today we've got two movies that really don't have anything in common, which is a running theme with our show and tells, even down to genre, type of movie, and all that kind of going on. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and just jump right in. First off, we have Adrian's pick for the show, which is Appleseed. Released in 2004, it was directed by Shinji Aramaki and stars Ai Kobayashi, Jorota Kusogi, and Yuki Matsuoka. If I have mispronounced any of those, I am sorry. In a utopian society created at the end of the Third World War, a female warrior who has been plucked from the Badlands begins to see cracks in this new facade. And what does this community have planned for the rest of humankind? So, real quick, this movie, you have to rent it through, I believe Apple is the only one that has it as a rental.
Amazon Prime used to have it, but it's not available anymore
Which
on
is
Amazon Prime.
Which is odd. You can stream it for free through Pluto TV, which is like an in-browser thing. I tried watching it through there, and I was able to.
Nice.
But there are ads, so there is that experience, if you want to go that way. I did find it another means, so I was able to watch it. I don't know, did you watch the original...
That we will not disclose.
Yeah. Did you watch it in Japanese or in English?
I've seen it both ways many times.
Okay, so I watched the English version. It was the only one that I had access to.
That's the first time I watched it in English the first time.
Gotcha. Okay, so I watched this in English.
Less cultured.
Oh,
You know.
I don't know. Less of a weeb, or more of a weeb.
Exactly.
Yeah, less of a weeb back
less
then.
of a weeb.
But Adrian, so this was your pick. Obviously, you've talked about it a lot from like nostalgic videos.
Yeah, I feel
But,
like I've name dropped Appleseed many times on this podcast.
So is that why you picked it?
Well, I didn't pick it because I name dropped it. I name dropped it because I really dig this movie. I think it has a great style to it. I really like the story. I think the animation is super fun. And some of the 3D stuff that it does is really cool. And you have to think about when this movie came out. It's a pretty large-scale project for the time. And a pretty robust narrative to go with it as well. And I know they've made a couple movies after. I haven't seen the subsequent movies. I probably should. I think there's like 2. But yeah, I really dig this movie.
Okay. This was my first time watching the film. I had never seen it. I had never even heard of it before.
It's pretty under the radar, yeah.
I literally was talking to Adrian about this, I think, off podcast, and I thought it was a movie about Johnny Appleseed, the like American folklore legend, and because there's like some Disney animated film about him. I was like, oh, there's an entire animated movie, and it's not that at all.
It is not about Johnny Appleseed.
Yeah, not in any way. But I think if it was about Johnny Appleseed, it would have been a good movie. I really do not like this movie in any way. I think maybe, so and I think it might. A lot of it may be due to the fact that I watched the English version.
Okay.
Which this is in a time before English voice actors for Japanese projects gave a damn. And it really was among the many things that lowered the experience for me. But I'll leave it at there before we dive into any spoilers, because a lot of my arguments do include spoilers. But yeah, we already said where you want to watch it. If you want to watch it, you can come back, because we're going to be spoiling the heck out of it. So let's go ahead and dive into spoilers for this territory. Yeah, I really did not enjoy this movie. I think... it's one of the only movies we've seen in this entire podcast, like, where I just did not want to pay attention. I felt so bored. And like,
wow.
This it's funny because this is the same creator as Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah, it's a very reputable movie.
And this one just did not hit anywhere near that for me. And
Which is so interesting because real quick, this I
Mm-hmm.
think it has like it got like an average of like 40 to 50% depending on where you look at it online.
Mm-hmm.
Which that it's not bad. Like it's not a bad film. So I'm finding it interesting that you like loathed it so much.
Which and I want to first off, I want to apologize because I know this is one of Adrian's nostalgic
Oh, that's
films.
okay.
Um,
I love it. I loved watching it the other day.
like I don't I never really felt like gripped by it. The story never did anything to make me feel to make me want to be invested. The main character, which they all have, even for anime, they've got stupid names. Was it like Darude Sandstorm was the main character? I don't remember
Basically,
her.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just Darude Sandstorm. She was boring, literally. Like, and this for I think a lot of people have a misconception about anime films and Japanese projects where they do like over sex characters. You know, like you see it a lot in arguments against anime. They kind of do here. There's a lot of lingering shots on her butt and just angles that, like, when she takes Hitomi hostage and she's like backing her away, the shot is like right behind her butt and it's kind of following her. There's a little bit of it here, not as much as Ghost in the Shell, but Ghost in the Shell was a little bit different in the way that it handled it. Not a main argument here, I'm saying. It just felt a little odd in this movie. Betrayal's up the wazoo. Like, literally, like, no one is a reputable person in this movie. Except for our, main character. Who, even though she's betrayed by her long-lost love, she's still in love with him. Like, even though, I guess the betrayal wasn't that bad, but, like, at this point, who didn't betray someone? Now, I do want to say, I think if I had watched this when I was younger, like you did, I'd probably like it a lot more.
Yeah, I feel like it's one, I've seen it so many times. I feel like I just like it's got that comfort aspect to it that like I know what's happening. So like I'm now watching it with the retrospective, like looking at all the nuanced storyline, like the detailed stuff, because I get the overarching plot. But yeah, I would agree. I think that has a huge influence on why I love this movie.
Yeah.
I think it's sick. I think those weapons that like split things in the most anime style you've ever seen in your life are sick, dude. I want those now. I want those weapons to exist immediately. And then just the mechs at like when the big like the mall scene when it's like time to really get going, kind of in the third act. I think it's just super fun.
But I think I've still seen better mechs elsewhere. Neon Genesis Evangelion, like Gundam has better mechs than this. Titanfall has better. Like,
yeah, I just watched Evangelion and it was good. It is definitely dated. It's tough to get through Evangelion now.
I also I do want to point out that I do understand this movie was made like 2001, 2002 when it was released in 2004. Even for then, the animation does not look good. I think I would have preferred this in hand-drawn animation.
I can see that as well. This was definitely that middle ground of technology. Like we've talked about Spirited Away or Spirited Within, the Spirit Within, the Final Fantasy movie, Beowulf, like how those were kind of in between technologies when those came out. This definitely is a victim of that. I don't think it looks necessarily atrocious, but there's definitely shots that don't hold up and the detail just isn't quite there anymore.
There are some actually beautiful shots in this movie, particularly when they're in Olympus, I believe is the name of the city. And they have like the buildings that are like one side giant solar panels, and then like there's like how it's total cyberpunk style, and I love it.
It's super cool. Yeah, the visuals are awesome. And I love the concept of everybody like the not like replicants, I forget what they call them.
Bioroids.
Yeah, like to solve that whole problem. Like that I find that super interesting.
That is definitely interesting. That's one of the more interesting aspects of it. But I don't feel like they really do. Like they obviously the whole movie's about them. But like again, I don't feel like roped in. Like there could have been a much more prevalent story about like similar to District 9, right? Like in going over apartheid or like racism or anything like that. That could have been explored a little bit more. And I think it was just thrown in here because they were like so neck deep in the sci-fi story, as Ghost in the Shell was as well.
Yeah, Ghost in the Shell is also a victim of that, and even like pretty much all iterations of Ghost in the Shell have been met with some level of like criticism and just complaints.
Yeah, and I think that there is some the interestingness of the writing of this movie comes from the fact that you have androids, or essentially living alongside humans in a 50-50 ratio, so that they can control or like emotion and like overpopulation and all that. That's really interesting, but it's just all the pointless betrayal, all this like just cheap storyline, and I need to talk about the dialogue, particularly in the English version, is really bad. I don't know if it was just the poor translation.
I just watched the English version, and again, though, maybe because I've heard it so many times, like that's just the movie for me. I might just be numb to it. Yeah.
Like I think maybe because time has gone on, and I think because the audience for anime has grown substantially, you're seeing better translations and better performances from the actors that are bringing the Japanese version to American audiences. That here it's lost in a bunch of lines of cheesy dialogue and trailer lines.
Yep.
It just like, but that's like 3/4 of your movie.
Yeah, and I will say that is hard. Having not seen this movie, I can see based off of what we get now for translations and animation, it's a downgrade. But for me, and those throwaway lines, when I was young, like you said, all those lines, I thought those characters were so cool.
Yeah, exactly.
like every other sentence, they're saying something cool, like "You can't save the earth if you don't have your coffee," and you're like, "Hell yeah! What does that even mean?"
But what about the rest of us who don't drink coffee? Oh, then you can't save the world without drinking Folgers Premium.
But I think, like, so, yeah, for me as a kid, and I think I've probably just carried that. This is one, we talk about this all the time, like, nostalgia versus it actually being a good movie. I'm going to rate this movie higher because of the nostalgia, just because I view it through a tinted lens. Like, I see this as a good movie. But in, like, a critical lens, I can definitely see that I still hold those characters, when I watched it just the other day, to that same standard I saw as a kid of, like, man, this guy's so cool. Or, like, oh, she is so awesome and, like, good at what she's doing.
Yeah.
So I think it's tough for me to probably see past that.
To be fair, though, I do want to highlight the fact that one of your favorite movies when you were a child has a strong female character in it.
Who knows what happened to me after that?
It all went downhill. And then all the American films started coming in, and it's just the white male. But anyhow, but yeah, I mean, like, I really don't have anything else to say about it. I think, I could sit here and I can knock it for its animation all day. Like one of the
old.
It is old, but I think there's that's 2004, and you still had movies like Toy Story and A Bug's Life that came up before this that look leagues better. And I think I always know, but the thing is, I always have an issue with 3D that's an anime style because it doesn't quite look right. There's only a few shows that have managed to get it. The other thing I want to point out...
I would argue that, like, Akira kind of did a similar animation style at times.
Not 3D, though. Akira was 20 years before this.
Well, I would say it was hand-drawn, but I feel like they still did the 3D shots in a similar way, where, like, they would spin the camera.
Oh.
Very similar shot style to the 3D aspect of the film, I mean. Like, they definitely were starting to incorporate that.
No, yeah, definitely. But, like, one of the things I had kind of, again, not knocking on it because it's older, but, like, I watched this and I kind of got early Rooster Teeth 3D animation vibes, like those first episodes of, like, Red versus Blue, where everything's a little floaty, when she's lying on the bed and she doesn't quite touch all of the sheets. Like, there's definitely some hiccups in the system, but again, this is an early film, so it's hard to, criticize it for it.
I bet it took those computers 2 years from
to render it all.
To render some of the shots.
But also one of the things too is that this feels like it almost was either a failed pitch for a video game. Like these are all the accumulated cutscenes of like a Final Fantasy style game that the creator maybe wanted to make, and then didn't get the funding for it, so they made a movie instead. Or really feels like it would have been better as a video game. I think, especially with the mechs and the storyline, I would play it too. I think it would be a lot better that way. I think they should really reapproach it now. I know there's a couple other Appleseed movies that have come out too.
Yeah,
There's
that's
a
what I think. There's like two. There's Alpha, Omega, or whatever,
something like
and
that.
7 or something. Yeah.
But yeah, they skipped
Yeah.
2 through 6. But I mean, yeah, that's really all I got to say. I mean, I think you're either gonna love this movie or you're gonna hate it. I think
I would agree. Yeah.
the you know you're seeing it here, but also like I was seeing it a lot in comments on like IMDb and other places that people just were either like, yeah, it's awesome, or no, it's really not that good. So
Well, you look at the Metascore critic, right? It's like 40 or 50 or
it's a
something
40
like
for
that.
Metacritic, yeah.
That's a pretty even split, all things considered. Like, people either love it, and even I'm sitting here, I love this movie. I'm not telling you that it's the best anime movie of 2004, like, by any means. So that's why you're seeing that lean, instead of being 50-50, it's a little like 60-40, because it's not the best film. It's just really fun for the people that do like it. And if you're one of the people that ends up liking it, then I'd say give it a shot if you kind of like quirky old movies.
That is exactly it. But that's really all I got to say. Anything else you want to add on there, Adrian?
No, I definitely think you should go check it out, though. Definitely find a free way to watch it, like Garret did. I wouldn't necessarily ask you to go out of your way to pay, especially with the mixed reception of this movie. But if you do seek it out, then you're probably someone that's going to like it if you've heard about what we've talked about here today and you feel like you still want to go see it. So go ahead.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get into some final thoughts and scores. I'll go first since this was the first time I had seen the movie. I said that Appleseed, for me, is dull, ugly, and devoid of any interesting thoughts or ideas. Its boring characters are horribly written, and there's no tension to be found. That being said, there's still some interesting design choices. The story has some unique elements to it, so I do give it a... Well, it's not a good score, but it's better than I should have given it, given the final thought I had. I have it an 18.
That's way better than I thought you were going to give it.
I mean, there's enough here to, like... There's parts of it that I'm glad I watched it for. And I can say that I've seen it now, I think, which is a novelty that is great. You can always throw that at a party and be like, well, you haven't seen Appleseed, have you?
I do think this is a trigger button topic in a movie conversation. If like people are talking about anime and you're like, well, you guys have seen 2004 Appleseed, right? And no one's gonna have seen it, and you get to kind of like you get to tighten your tie a bit and be like,
I am the king weeb. But 18 is my score. Adrian, what was your final thought and score?
Yeah, final thought I think is this is a movie that I think is like one of those deep cuts. If you have kind of been going through film and you want one that's like obscure and that not many people like are watching or have watched, then I definitely think you should give it a shot. And if anything we said interested you, then I absolutely think it's worth it. So I gave this movie, it definitely rhymes with Garrett's, but I give it an 80.
Okay. This might actually be our largest score differential ever for a movie, and I actually want to see if that's correct. Hold on, give me 1 second. One of the things I will say is that I think if you're gonna want to watch an anime movie that's sci-fi and has sort of similar elements to it, I would highly recommend Ghost in the Shell instead. I think that
same director.
It is the same creator, absolutely, but I think that it is just leagues better in terms of its storytelling. So, average score, yeah, 62 is the score differential for that. Is it the highest? No! It has still been edged out by Valentine's Day.
Oh, yeah.
Which was a 72 and a 2. So, anyhow, moving on, we have the second movie for today, which was my pick for Adrian to watch, and that is Black Dynamite. Released in 2009, it was directed by Scott Sanders and stars Michael Jai White, Arsenio Hall, and Tommy Davidson. Black Dynamite is the greatest African-American action star of the 1970s, but when his only brother is killed by the man, it's up to him to find justice. I recommended this movie because it was just... I was going through and watching... this was a couple months back, and I was dog sitting for my parents and was just watching movies while I was hanging out there. And this was one of the ones I'd watched. I'd always heard about it, never seen it, and I walked away from it having an experience. I'll tell you about that when I get to my review. But I definitely knew it was something that I wanted to show Adrian as soon as possible. And we actually had the pleasure of watching this together, which is the first time we've watched any movie from a show and tell together. So I got to hear your reactions in real time, which is great for a movie like this because there's a lot of comedy in it. And so that's why I picked the movie. Adrian, this is your first time having seen the movie. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I had no idea going into this what this movie was, but it very quickly identifies itself as a fantastic parody of like what the 1960s like beat cop era films.
It's a loving send up of blaxploitation films.
There you go. Yeah. And it's so well done. It's got a great plot to it that's like super followable, but it just makes fun of itself at every single turn with like things that like there's obviously big jokes, but there's also a ton of little jokes that happen all the time, and things like if you're familiar with the genre that you're like, wow, like they got that, like that's correct, and stuff like that really makes this movie a gem. And I don't know how I hadn't heard of it, but I'm glad that I watched it for sure.
Absolutely. I love this movie. I think it's hilarious. I think it is like this is one of the best parody movies I've seen.
Agreed.
In a very long time, because it is like it has a love for the films, but it's also like making fun of them, which is what you want a parody to be, not just like date movie where it's just trying to skewer everything and hates all of it. So but if you would like to watch Black Dynamite, it is available to stream on HBO Max, I believe. Let me go ahead and double check on that real quick. I don't want to sound like I haven't prepared. Let's see here. It is available to stream, yes, on HBO Max, so you can stream it for free there if you're subscribed, and you can rent it pretty much anywhere else. That being said, let's go ahead and dive into the movie. Really got to hand it to Michael Jai White, who really carries this movie as Black Dynamite.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much him interacting with other people is the whole movie.
Yes, and just every part of this movie is ridiculous, but it's hilarious. Like, you were saying there's the big jokes. You know, obviously there's a lot of humor going on, but there's the small things too. The sequence when he stands up too quickly and you can see the boom microphone hanging in the center of the shot and he reacts to it.
And then it also doesn't leave. Like, it stays there the whole shot.
It's so good. But then just, like, every little joke here, just, it lands. And, I mean, I would say, you know, there's a couple of them that don't necessarily land with every single person. I do think that people who were alive during the time that these films were coming out may get a lot more out of this comedically.
Definitely. The more familiar you are with the genre and the type of film, the more you're going to love it.
Yeah, it's completely outrageous, though, and I think anyone that watches this movie will really enjoy it. I mean, the one scene that really stands out to me, too, is the one where they're in... they're in the place called Roscoe's. Before it's Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles, it's like Roscoe's... like soup and tea or something like that, and it's something that doesn't work, and they have that epiphany about the alcohol, the malt liquor, and it's the most convoluted like realization ever, and they're going from like candy to politics to like it's just like Greek mythology, and they're like, and who was he the god of? And all of them are like, the god of agriculture. Like, it's
like everyone's following perfectly. And then I love that they're like at the diner and they're writing on like the menu board, the special board. Like he's writing it all out. It's super well done.
I mean, the only real critique I can have where this movie does fall apart is in its ending. I think it gets a little too wacky when you've got Black Dynamite parachuting towards the White House so he can take on Nixon. Like, it's jumping the shark a little bit too much. It's still funny to watch Nixon and Black Dynamite fight with nunchucks and stuff.
Yeah.
And just completely just kicks the shit out of Nixon's wife. Like, it's
I agree.
ridiculous.
I think it does get a little ahead of itself, but I think I don't... It's tough for me to think about what the right balance for the end would have been, because I think if they kept it too local, it wouldn't have felt big enough. Mm-hmm. And where they took it felt a little too big, and I don't know what that middle ground was or is. I think they did the best that they probably could with such an outrageous movie. Like, what else do you do? I can imagine being in the writer's room and then being like, so how do we end it? And they're spitballing, and people are like, no, like, that's not it. And someone goes, what if he beats up Nixon's wife and then kills him? And Like, oh, okay. Well,
But
let's hold on.
but also there's a kung fu master who has his own island full of assassins, and he's the one creating this potion that makes black men's dicks smaller, which is the entire point of
Yeah.
this. It's so stupid, but it's so funny. It's not stupid in any bad way, shape, or form. It's kind of like Monty Python, right? Where it's so stupid that it is funny.
Yeah, and I also think that it's one of those things where, like, everybody in this movie, like, one, you definitely couldn't make this movie with anybody else starring in it and making fun of the fact that it's the culture making fun of itself in this movie, like that era of film making fun of itself. That club is the only way that this movie's funny. And it just hits home so hard. Like, there's a scene where literally there's like a meeting of the pimps of the city, and they're all sitting and they're like just talking about, like, man, I love pimping. And Black Dynamite comes in and he goes, listen here, you're not allowed to pimp anymore. And then the guy goes, well, how am I gonna pimp if I'm not allowed to pimp? And he just, like, basically keeps, like, it just, like, circling that, and he, like, voices get higher and higher as, like, the pimps are more and more upset. It's just super, but it's like stuff like that where it's just super funny, and you couldn't do it if you were anybody else but the people that were so close to the genre, and it's hilarious.
That sequence also has one of my favorite moments too, when he's talking about the drug dealing, and he's like, "You can't deal any more drugs." And the one guy who's his name is Cedric Yarborough, he was in Reno 911, is one of the pimps. He's like, "But Black Dynamite, I deal drugs." And he's like, "Don't do it anymore."
Like, he just, because that's his whole life. He's like, what am I supposed to do?
It's so ridiculously funny that it's really hard to explain. If you have HBO, please go watch this movie.
Yeah, it's well.
It is hilarious. Like, oh my gosh. I mean, no one is like, no one's treated stupidly. No one's like directly made fun of, I would say.
No, it's what's funny is the genre. Like, no one in the episode exactly. No one has been like, "Wow, that's stupid." It's all really good.
Yeah.
It's just that the plot points of that genre are exaggerated to the point where you can't help but laugh.
Exactly.
It's just super funny.
Absolutely, yeah. It's so ridiculous, but I mean, it is kind of hard to talk about comedy movies though, because I think it really kind of comes down to what your kind of humor is, but also like it does make it a little bit hard to critique it. Like, we're trying right now, but I think what it really comes down to is us reciting our favorite sequences, right?
Yeah, and I think it's stuff because you should watch it. Like,
yeah. It's
funny because it's in a film that is designed to have this joke be made. And, like, for us just gushing over some of the best parts of it, that doesn't do it any justice. You should just go watch the movie.
Yeah, and even if you haven't seen any blaxploitation films,
you
can still find this pretty goddamn funny because of the ridiculousness of its situations. And I think if you do have an understanding of blaxploitation films, or if you were alive during the time, you may see things that we didn't.
And I think what works so well for that is because this is that film. Yeah. Like, it's just exaggerated. So you are watching a real movie. Like, it is a real genre film. It's just funny instead of, like, overly serious. And I think that's why anyone can enjoy this, because it not only simultaneously is, like, making fun of a genre, it's showing you the genre at the same time, and it creates this perfect first-time viewing.
It really is a gateway, and I think that for those of you who watch it, like me, who's interested in film history, I would want to go out and look at some of these blaxploitation films and see if it lives up to that legacy. If it really is a loving send-up of them. So
yeah.
But I think that's really all I got. I highly recommend watching this movie. I think it's a lot of fun. But yeah, what about you, Adrian? What's your final thoughts? What's your score here?
Yeah, I think it's really, really good. I definitely think it's hard to talk about. You could spoil this movie for somebody by just telling them the plot points, but it doesn't take away from the film at all.
No.
Like, the movie, it's such a unique film, and it's definitely a rare gem in the comedy world that I'm glad we had. I had no idea it existed, so I'm glad that it came out and that it's real. And because of that, I gave it an 89.
89. Wow, we are really close. I said Black Dynamite is a love letter to the blaxploitation films of the 70s, and while it's clearly a parody with comedic elements, it's just a great time regardless, and it's a gateway to the genre that most people don't really know anything about. Because of that, I gave it an 87. I think it's a really strong movie, and I'm totally looking to add it to my Blu-ray collection. So, nice. But that is going to bring us to the end of this episode. Adrian, if anyone's interested in following us online or seeing what we're doing, where we're going, all that kinds of stuff, where can they do that?
The Drive Back Podcast on all your podcasting apps, as well as here on YouTube at the Drive Back Podcast. Go ahead and subscribe. We post every Monday on a regular cadence, and then every once in a while, only on YouTube, we post some extra visual content, whatever that ends up being. We kind of just play that by ear, but you guys do get some extra stuff if you're here on YouTube. So yeah, the Drive Back Podcast. Check us out.
That is absolutely right. And coming up next week, we have a first-timers, but mixed with a back-to-back. We've decided to mix our little episodes around a little bit. We're going to be finally taking a look at the Paddington Bear movies,
which I'm stoked about. I still have not seen either of them.
I have only heard great things about them, and my expectations are up here. So if my expectations are met or surpassed, that says something, I feel.
I think Paddington 2 has like 100% on a couple of different rating sites, or at least it used to.
Oh, easily, yeah.
It's considered in many circles to be like the perfect film.
I'm curious to see what it currently has on Metacritic. It has an 88 on Metacritic, which has earned it a must-see banner for Metacritic, which is pretty rare that movies get a must-see on Metacritic.
So I'm looking at multiple YouTube videos right now that says why Paddington 2 is the greatest film of all time. Part 1 of 2. Paddington 2 loses top movie of all time, but it was in the running in 2018.
Jeez Louise. Anyhow, with that in mind, we can't wait for next week. So we love you so much. We'll see you next time here on The Drive Back. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Drive Back. Make sure to be on the lookout for new episodes every Monday, and make sure to follow us on social media.